Okay, Galatians chapter 2. Now, yesterday we talked about Paul going to Arabia and Damascus and getting revelation from Jesus Christ about the good news. So the word revelation, it's a revealing. I think Merriam-Webster's dictionary says the act of revealing or communicating divine truth, something that is revealed by God to humans, an act of revealing to make or making known, something that is revealed, especially an enlightening or astonishing discourse. So God, Jesus Christ, revealed to Paul the good news. And actually, Paul wrote 1/3 of the whole New Testament, so he's going to reveal some things to us. So he says, Then 14 years after I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas and took Titus with me also, and I went up by revelation and communicated unto them that gospel which I preached among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. Okay, so he's saying he preached among the Gentiles and he shared privately to them which were of reputation. I think we still have that going on today. Let's just take the church that preaches the truth, that the church that they're concerned with the poor, they're concerned with the homeless and the naked, and they help them and they preach the truth. So there's some people that it's almost like they're too good for that. They feel like they're better than that, and they have a reputation to uphold. Well, Paul met with these people privately, and he shared the gospel with them privately. So that's what he's meaning. So then he goes on to say, But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised, and that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privily to spy out our liberty which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage. Okay, so they're preaching this gospel, and there's other Jews that are listening to this, and the Jews are trying to bring them into bondage again. So there's this whole thing of circumcision. In the Old Testament, Abraham had a covenant with God, and to mark that covenant, he had all the males cut the foreskins off of their private parts as to establish that covenant. And the Jewish culture and Judaism keeps this to establish covenant with God. So by the 8th day that a male child is born, they will, remove the foreskin from the genitals. So this is like the law. But here's Paul with revelation from Jesus Christ. Actually, God gave him revelation to go up and preach the gospel among the Gentile. Here he is, and they're trying to say to him, Paul, you need to have these people circumcised. So these people that don't really know the gospel of Jesus Christ, they're trying to impose their rules on the people who are outside of the Jewish culture. So the people outside the Jewish culture are called Gentiles. People who aren't considered Israelites or the children of God, they're considered Gentiles. So I fit into that category. I'm not Jewish. I wasn't an Israelite or Hebrew. I'm a Gentile. So Paul, who was the Pharisee of Pharisees, who knew Jewish law inside and out, is not preaching among the Jews. He's actually preaching among those people outside of the Jews. That's interesting. So he goes on to say, Titus, who was with him, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So they tried to get Titus to be circumcised. And that because of false brethren unawares brought in, who came in privately to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage, to whom we gave place by subjection, no, not for an hour, that the truth of the gospel might continue with you. So they did not listen to them very much, of them trying to impose their laws and trying to compel Titus to get circumcised. So Titus was a Gentile. Greeks are Gentiles. Titus was a Greek, and a Greek is a Gentile. And the Other Jews were trying to compel him to get circumcised, but they didn't put up with it. They're saying we're free in Jesus Christ. We don't need to be circumcised. But of those who seem to be somewhat whatsoever they were, to make it no matter to me, God accepts no man's person. For they who seem to be somewhat in conference added nothing to me. This is kind of confusing the way he says it. So here's man with his idea of what Paul and Titus and the people he's preaching to. Here's these Jews coming in and they're giving their ideas. And he's saying, God doesn't accept man and man's wisdom and his person. What God has given revelation for his plan. Okay, then he goes on to say, but contrawise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was committed unto Peter, for he that wrought effectively in Peter to the apostleship of the circumcision, the same was mighty in me towards the Gentiles. Yeah, let me go through this, because it took me a minute to kind of read this and meditate on this. It's good to meditate on verses like these, because when you kind of unwrap the mystery, it's exciting. So what he's saying is Paul was sent to the Gentile, and the Gentiles are uncircumcised. And Peter was sent to them who were circumcised. The Jews were circumcised. And then he takes a side note saying, hey, God wrought effectively in Peter to the apostleship of the circumcision. Basically, God called Peter to be an apostle to the circumcised. He called Peter to go preach to the Jews. All right. And when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen and they into the circumcision. Okay, so he's kind of speaking this again, that James, Cephas, and John, who are Jews, when they saw the grace that God gave to Paul, they basically embraced him. They invited him in. They gave him the right hand of fellowship. The right hand of fellowship is a good thing. When you shake people's hands and you look them in the eye, there's a connection that's made and there's an acceptance there. So they accepted Paul. And then they said Paul should go to the heathen, and they go to their circumcision. So the heathen, again, is the Gentile, is the Greek, is the people outside of the Hebrews, the Israels, the Jews. Okay. Only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I also was forward to do. That sentence right there is amazing. When I was looking for a church to go to, I was looking for a church of doers as well as hearers. And one of the indicators that I look for was, do they have a food ministry? Do they have a clothing ministry? Do they help people pay their bills? Like, these are basic things. I know it's not like this, but I think the churches should do the things that the government is doing. Like, we should feed and clothe and help programs get people housed and have their bills paid. We should not refer them to the government to do that, because, the people that provide for you are the people you kind of pledge allegiance to. And I'd rather someone pledge allegiance to Jesus Christ through a church than pledge allegiance to something political. That's not to say our government doesn't help us. Our government programs are good. There'd be a lot of people on the streets if we didn't have government programs. But I just think, the ecclesia, the governing body, the church, should have resources to handle that. So much so that the government shouldn't or wouldn't have to handle it. They can worry about our national defense. Yeah. Okay. So here goes. This is Paul's charge against Peter. So this is pretty telling. I like this section because it shows how we are children of God. Yes, we are renewing our minds. We're also still human. We walk after the flesh. We don't war after the flesh, but we do have to, do some things in the flesh. So, all right, so here goes. But when Peter was come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to blame. For before that certain came from James, he did eat with the Gentiles, but when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which were of the circumcision. Okay, so here's James and here's Peter. They were eating with the Gentiles, the people outside of the Jews. And then when they saw the Jews come, the circumcision, when they saw the Jews come in, they separated themselves from the Gentiles and they went to eat with the Jews. Okay. And the other Jews disassembled likewise with him, insomuch that Barnabas also was carried away with their dissimulation. So they're looking at things in a twisted way here. And they're still trying to uphold an old tradition, which is looking at the Gentiles as unclean and looking to stay with the Jews. And Paul is trying to call them out on this. He's breaking these old traditions. But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? Okay, so he's saying to Peter, hey, you're living like the Jews, and you're trying to compel the Jews. He's saying you're living like the Gentiles, and you're trying to persuade the Gentiles to be like the Jews. Okay, we who are Jews by nature and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. So here's the main point here, is this sentence right here, which is verse 16. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ came, he lived a sinless life, he was crucified, he was buried, he raised the third day, he went to the center of the earth, he took the keys of death and hell, and he basically returned ownership of the earth to us, and his blood took away our sin. So there's the gospel right there. Jesus reconnected us back to God. So now we don't have to worry about this law of the Old Testament, because in Jesus Christ, this law of the Old Testament is fulfilled. And there's many things in that law that we don't have to go by anymore. And one of the things is circumcision. We're Gentiles. When we get saved, we don't have to cut the foreskin off of our genitals. We don't have to go by Jewish laws. And this is what Paul is saying. We're justified by faith of Jesus Christ, not by the works of the law. So we don't go under Judaism law, we go under the faith in Jesus Christ. So our mandate is to know Jesus Christ. Okay, so he goes on to say, even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Now this right here, this sentence, by the works of the law, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. So in the Old Testament, if you went by the law and you fulfilled all the law, you were right with God. And it was your belief, your faith in God that actually made you right with God. And it hasn't changed. Here, it's our faith in Jesus Christ that makes us right with God. So Jesus Christ fulfilled the law. So we should have faith in Jesus Christ. Okay, but if while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners, is therefore Christ the minister of sin? God forbid. For if I build again the thing which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. For I through the law am dead to the law, that I might live unto God. Okay, so he clears this up in this next sentence. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. Okay, what Jesus did made us justified. We just believe in Jesus, we get to know him, and we follow him, and we're justified. We're made right with God. And these other Jews are saying, no, there's still the law. You have to go by the law. But Paul is saying, no, we're fulfilling the law by our faith in Christ. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. That was the end of the chapter. We'll do chapter 3 tomorrow. Thank you.